Good evening.
Every life has a path that it follows, and sometimes we'll take those turns and go down a road a little less followed, or those roads will lead us to adventure. This isn't really an adventure, but it was one of those experiences in my life that I really would like to share. You know exactly what time it usually is. This was 4:18 on December 22nd on a rainy day in Illinois. It hadn't started to snow yet, but we were in our 13th day of gloom. We hadn't seen the sun. Everybody was on edge. And it was Christmas time, so everybody's running in and out of the mall. I would not have been in the mall that day if it hadn't been for the fact that I was part of a secret Santa group at school. And the person that I had drawn was my best friend. I had looked high and low to find the perfect gift for her. And that Thursday night, the night before we were exchanged our big presents at the breakfast the next day, she walked in to show me what she'd found. She had seen me wearing a scarf earlier in the week and she had admired it, little knowing that I had picked out one that was similar to match her color scheme. It was perfect with her auburn hair and her blue eyes. And she walked in to show me what she'd found. The exact same scarf. And to make it worse, she found it at 25% off. Okay, so here I am. I'm on the way to the mall, trolling down the different lanes, trying to find a place close enough that I wouldn't get soaking wet. I found a spot about 4 rows back from the door, and as I'm getting out of the car, of course, I stepped in a puddle. Well, I'm looking across the parking lot, and I see up ahead of me a line of people who were going to get on a bus. Now, this bus was not the great big city bus or a school bus. It was a smaller little bus that oftentimes you'll see carrying senior citizens when they have, they live in a community, and they'll have this little bus that'll take them where they need to go, the doctor, the mall, whatever. And the last gentleman in the line dropped something. He had several packages, but he dropped something and it kind of splashed, and he didn't notice that he dropped it. So I hot-footed it a little faster, got up there, picked it up, and the bus was leaving. So I shoved it in my coat pocket, ran inside, and an hour and a half later I found another perfect gift, hoping she didn't have it. It was after Christmas when I wore that same coat again, and I put my hands in the pockets and drew out what I had picked up at the mall. It was a wallet. One of those craft wallets that you've seen. They give you the little pieces of faux leather and the little vinyl string that you whip stitch around the edges. Inside was only a couple dollars. No ID, but a picture of a lady who looked like she had a 40s hairdo and a sweet smile, and even in black and white you could tell she had gorgeous eyes. I thought how sweet for him to carry a picture of his wife for that long. And then I kept looking, and I found, folded up and slipped in one of the pockets, a letter. I drew it out. It was addressed to Mike Wilson, and it came from somebody each. I couldn't read the return address. But when I opened it up, I read the letter. Dear Mike, my father says that at 15, I'm too young to date, much less say I love a mature man of 18. And as you go off to war, I want you to know I remember you and I always will. Love, Mary. Oh my, you could tell he had read and read and reread this letter. The folds were beginning to tear apart. And I've carefully folded it back up, got out the phone book, and started dialing. I called every one of the senior centers in the town I lived in. I lived in Bloomington, Illinois. And so when I'd finished all the Bloomington ones, I started calling Normal, the Twin City. Nothing there. So I got out the map, started looking for places around Bloomington. And about 30 miles north is a little town called Pontiac. And I called that senior center, and I told them the story that I was looking for Mike Wilson, and this is, what had happened, blah, blah, blah. And a nice lady named Frances says, well, we have a Mike Wilson here, and he could very easily be the one. It's Colonel Mike Wilson. He had served in World War II. And that could very easily be his wallet. I made arrangements to go up and visit her that Saturday. And I walked in, I sat down, we talked a little bit. She took me to the community room. And there sat a man. He was sitting in an armchair that was looking out the window. But he had a book on his lap, but he wasn't reading. He was just kind of gazing out the window. He looked rather forlorn. I wonder if it's because 3 weeks earlier he'd lost his wallet. And Frances took me over and she said, Colonel Mike, this is Kathy, and she wants to know if maybe you lost this wallet. And we showed it to him, and his eyes just beamed. His smile got very big as he stood there, ramrod straight, saying, yes, it's mine, and I am so glad you have found it and returned it. And I asked him about the young lady. I said, I had to read the letter. I had to. I couldn't resist. He said, that's okay. And Frances says, well, who is it from? And Mike said, oh, a beautiful young lady I used to know named Mary Leach. And Frances kind of cocked her head and said, we just admitted a Mary Leach.
Wow.
And he said, really? And Frances says, well, let me go get her. She was there because she'd had a hip operation. And so she came walking in with her walker very slowly, and her head kind of bowed because she was watching where she was going. And you could just see as she crossed that expanse to where Mike was standing, that was his Mary.
Wow.
And as she got closer and she raised her head, she recognized that soldier. And her face just broke out into the biggest smile, and a tear rolled down her cheek. And Mike said, Mary, my dear. And she said, Mike, my love. He guided her over to a little settee, and they sat down holding hands, jabbering away. Frances and I talked a little bit, and I turned to go, and they told me to stop, please. They wanted to thank me again. And I said I was proud to be able to be part of that. And they asked me if I would come back and visit. And I said, of course I would. That next Valentine's Day, they were married. I stood up for them. Neither one had ever married. Neither one had children. So at the age of 33, I was adopted. And I enjoyed it very much. For the next few years, I got very close to Mike and Mary. But they were very practical people, and they knew that their time together was going to be short. And they loved going places, and oftentimes I'd take them someplace. And one time, they went to visit the stonemason because they were going to be prepared for when that time came that they were going to leave this earth. And it was about 8.5 years after they met again that I stood with Mike as his beloved Mary was buried. A month later, I stood at that same spot as I buried Mike. They had made all their plans. The funeral was paid for, flowers had been paid for, the headstone had already been carved and laid. And on their headstone it said, Mary and Mike. And in the middle, where you might see flowers or a cross, sometimes you'll see praying hands, theirs were clasped hands. Because, you know, every time I saw them, they were always holding their hands. And I like to think, as I tell this story about them right now, they're up there looking down, still holding hands. Thank you.
Right.